have extra training.
You guys good?
Mm-hmm.
Anytime you want. We're all
On
here.
you, Mr. President.
All right. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 6:29 p.m.
Zoom's thinking real quick. There you go.
Recording in progress.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Gadd,
Here.
Commissioner Nelson,
Here.
Commissioner Snooks,
Here.
Commissioner Evans,
Here.
Mayor Tarkington,
Here.
Chair Nyberg.
Here. Would everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? We'll go on to 1D, general public input, limited to 10 minutes, 3 minutes per speaker. Seeing none, moving forward, I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll raise that motion to approve the agenda.
I second it.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Gadd,
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson,
Yes?
Commissioner Snooks,
Yes.
Commissioner Evans,
Yes.
Mayor Tarkington,
Yes.
Chair Nyberg.
Yes. Moving on to number 2, discussion item agenda, 2A East Oak Drive alignment discussion.
Yes, and so these two items, we don't need a decision tonight, but some direction from the planning commission, because they're both gonna be in front of the board at the next meeting, and it'd be nice for the board to hear some of the planning commission's thoughts on these items moving forward. So this first one, the East Oak Drive Alignment Project, this is part of the new signal on the east side of town. And we're trying to get funding for the signal right now, and this would be a future phase, working with the developer. They would be extending the road north, we call it Bayfield Parkway North. And then how does it turn into Oak Drive? And so that's the discussion we're having. Ultimately, all these plans, or most of these plans, except for maybe one, really do touch on the school property. And so Katie and I went to a school board meeting last month just to present the concepts again. These were done in 2019, and everyone slept since then. So just presenting the concepts again to the board, the school board, and then wanting to give it to the planning commission and the board of trustees. And then ultimately, we would like to get the planning commission, the board of trustees, and the school board together in one joint meeting that we notice, and have some decisions made on how we want to move forward, so that we can get the engineering done. We have the budget approved, we have a scope of services approved for the engineering, but we just don't have the alignment that we can tell them to move forward with. So that's kind of what this discussion will be. So again, I'll pass along your thoughts to the board, and then we'll have a bigger meeting with everybody at the table when we make some decisions. So I just want to walk you through, I won't go through the whole document, but just want to walk you through the alternatives so you understand. And we did do, back in the spring, we did a public process where we invited the public to 3 different meetings, and also had it on the website, and we were trying to get some feedback from the public. We didn't have a good turnout, I would say. Of the 3 meetings, we had 30 people total combined come, and we only received, I believe, 9 responses from the public on this project, and most of them, I think the good news is most of them were from the neighbors surrounding this area. So at least we had to hear from those that are gonna be most impacted. But that's really hard for us to make some decisions based on public feedback when you only hear from 9 people in the entire community. So it's really not a good sample. But again, they're from adjacent neighbors, and so I thought that was at least beneficial. And so concept 1 is, all of the concepts will have this, again, what we're calling right now Bayfield Parkway North Road, that comes up from the new intersection, and then it gets to a roundabout. You head east, and that goes into the larger Bayfield East development, which again, we'll go back one page real quick. This is just a bigger picture, but again, there's a series of roads that'll be in there with some other potential connections to other neighborhoods within the town. So this would not be the only connection, but this would probably be the main connection to that neighborhood. So just something to think about as we're looking through these. So again, this first one, the road would come up and it would just kind of angle off and come and meet with the existing Oak Drive. This is where the current driveway is for the intermediate school, if you're familiar with that drop-off situation. And so parents, when they come in, they would come in here in the middle, the intermediate school, and then they come out right here. Well, this would actually create a T for their driveway. If they're turning left, it's going to be hard to do that with more traffic here. So the idea is they would come to the roundabout, turn around, and then come up. If they're turning right towards the highway, that's an easy turn for them. So yeah, there's some complications with that one. All the alternatives, again, they were done in 2019 by SEH Engineering, who's doing the design work for the signal. And they're weighted based on certain criteria. And the criteria is, right-of-way impacts, level of service, additional impacts to the gas gathering lines, because there is a gas well right here, and this is the gathering line, and then the gas easement, the road easement. Additional impacts to irrigation pipe. This is the purple pipe is the Los Pinos, right? Yeah, Los Pinos irrigation. And so there's going to be an impact to that pipe. Anticipated construction cost, impacts to the school access, and then all of these are weighted. And so the reds on these pictures that you'll see, these images, the reds are the worst rated, or no, sorry, the gray is the worst. The gray is F, A is the best rated, and so the engineers looked at each one of these criteria for each plan and said, how is this rated? And this is really engineering weighted, so they're looking at the engineering criteria. The school district had said they would really like this one the best right now, the school board, because it has the least amount of impact to the school property. But they would actually like to see it combined with the oil and gas easement, and I don't know if that's going to be a possibility, but they'd like to see it pushed more to the north, right behind these properties. And I know some of these properties are already concerned with putting all the traffic onto Oak Drive, as well as having a road behind them, and so pushing it to their backyards, I think they're going to have a lot more concerns. But I don't even know if that's possible with reading the easements for these. I think that's going to be some legal things that we'd have to go through in order to do that. But that's what the school has suggested as their first choice. Let's go to the second one. Is there any questions on that first one?
No, I just note that it's got 2 D ratings
Yeah.
and an F. So I understand the school district, but from an engineering standpoint, it's one of the lowest rated options out of all these.
Yep. Yeah, it got a C total, and so it is the lowest rated of all of them. And, a couple reasons why is the irrigation, they really want us to come in at a perpendicular, the road crossing the irrigation pipe perpendicular, and this one does not do that. So if they had to get in and maintain this piece of the pipe, it's going to be a lot more complicated because there's a lot more roadway they'd have to get through to get to that. And then same with the gathering lines, it's just coming across at a weird angle for that gathering line. So again, the maintenance of those are going to be more complicated. And then the current driveway is pretty small between the two properties, so this would require some right-of-way. And there's a retaining wall in there that, from my understanding, is not in great shape already, and so there'd be some engineering to that as well. So that's why this one, some of the reasons why it didn't rate as high as the others for the engineering review.
Where would the bus loop go?
It would stay. The one that goes in, it's right here.
Okay.
So it would stay. And then if they want to come to the highway, they'd come back out and they would come this way down. The other thing the school board did bring up is that they're looking at possibly the middle school being redone in the future, and they don't really know how the drop-off is going to work when that happens. And so they were really concerned about anything that impacted the current drop-off situation because that could constrain what they do in the future on that property. So that's understandable for that property. The next one, and I will just say, I had a big staff in Durango, and I used to always tell my staff, all the easy things are done. So everything that's left is gonna take, it's complicated. And so none of these alternatives are like, that's the perfect one. You know, they all have their issues, they all have some benefits, and everything that's easy is done. So I'll remind you from time to time as we get some of these projects. So the second alternative, this one, I think the neighbors rated one of the higher ones for them. And really the reason why they did that is because it keeps all of the traffic out of this neighborhood now. So this is a two-way, it's essentially the same driveway that's there now, but it would just be for the local traffic. So anybody coming from the new development or from the highway coming to the schools, or bypassing the schools would bypass the neighborhood. And so it's understandable why the neighborhood likes this option. But this option also shows some removal of pavement here so that the street ends at the end of these properties. And the school had some concerns with that again because they don't know what they're going to be doing to the middle school property. And so changing some of that was a concern for them. But this option allows people that coming out of this driveway to turn left or right or go straight. And it's probably going to end up being some sort of four-way stop at that location. So that when you're coming out of the intermediate school, you have some options to turn different directions. And then this one scored it was the second highest on the engineering score. It had no Fs. But it did have 1D, which was, again, the impacts to the irrigation, because it crosses it 3 times, or kind of 4 almost. So just some impacts to that. The gathering line's a little bit simpler crossing, but it's still not ideal, but it's going to be really hard to cross both of those in an ideal perpendicular fashion. Any questions or thoughts on that one before we move on to the next one? Okay. So option number 3. This one, again, it's very similar to 2. The differences are that this would be the current driveway out of the intermediate school would be a one-way north, and then anybody in the neighborhood would be a one-way this direction, which is directly across from the access to the intermediate school for the parent drop-off. I'm not really sure how these two would work, whether they both have to be stops. So our engineers would have to do a little more detailed analysis to determine how these two intersections would work. But that's essentially what this one looks like. So again, this road, they're showing it's remaining, but it probably doesn't need to on this design as well. But again, the school's concerned. They don't know what they're doing in the middle school, and then it's just they say it's a lot of their land that's being taken up by this roadway. Option number 4, again similar to 2 and 3. This one actually takes an access directly across from the intermediate's entry into the drop-off and makes that two-way, and the current driveway that goes north out of the intermediate school would be pedestrian only. And so that's really the main difference on this one.
It's
and then
also the highest rated.
Yep, this is the highest rated, just because of it scored the same with the impacts to irrigation as 2. Actually no, it's a C, so it's a little bit less. And I'm guessing it's because it only has this crossing here and this crossing here now, because this is all pedestrian, so you don't have a vehicle, and it's existing. And then it scored higher on level of service, just keeping the cars moving. it scored higher there than the first one, and it scored the same as 2 and 3. But those two are really the big differences on this one. And then the construction cost was a little bit, so. And I talked to, actually, Mike Fouts on the school board, he also with FCI, and he kind of gave me some, this was done in 19, and he's pretty much saying it's doubled what it was in 19 to build it now. And so he gave me some estimates, and our engineers will get us more detailed estimates when we have a chosen plan that they can move forward with. But I think we all kind of recognize that construction costs are a lot more, and so yeah, that's some fun stuff to try and figure out how to get to this place of building it. And then the last one. So this one, it scored pretty high. Actually, this was the second highest in terms of engineering, because it's got some A's in there. It's got the level of services an A, additional impacts to irrigation became an A because it doesn't cross the irrigation at all. And then the impacts to the school access became an A because it doesn't impact the school access at all. But this one would require the town to acquire at least 2 properties, which are housing units in our community, so that's a tough one for the town. We have talked to both of those owners, and I think they're willing to have the conversation. We didn't get an absolutely not from them. They're willing to have the conversation, but we don't, at what cost, we don't really know what that would look like right now. But again, that's never the ideal solution to take housing units out of the community. But the school, I would say, the superintendent and the staff, this was their first choice because it really doesn't impact the school property at all. I think the school board realized that they don't want to impact housing, and so that's why they were looking at the first option. But this is probably their second option because it doesn't impact their property as much and doesn't impact their access, and so from an engineering perspective, this one makes the most sense. From a neighborhood perspective, it's a tough one because it's taking out housing and it's pushing everybody into the neighborhood, just like option A did, but it pushes them in back here versus right in here. So even this whole neighborhood is now going into an existing street, which probably needs some improvements too as well if it's going to handle that amount of traffic.
And again, this one didn't rate the highest.
Not with the
Not with the F.
neighbors. Actually ranked it was tied with number 2 with the neighbors, but for engineering, number 4 ranked the highest.
Yeah.
But with the neighbor, I was surprised that the neighbors ranked it high, because the the neighbors that really showed up were these 4, and I felt like they were really concerned with this access coming in, and this one wasn't as concerning to them because I don't know why, but.
And those are both mobile homes. I want to say when we first looked at the cost of this, it was like $96,000 and like 110.
Yeah.
That was like an
now.
18. Yeah, they're not that much.
So
No.
really, like I said, I'd like to get some of your feedback. No decisions need to be made, but just some of your thoughts that we can share, and Ashley will be there, but with the board next week of what the planning commission's thinking on, these alternatives. If you have any thoughts.
So my first thought, and I think our duty and obligation, is to plan for the growth of Bayfield as a whole and make sure that when we're making capital improvements like this, that it is going to improve the city for the long term with a minimal impact on our citizens as well. And we're talking about tapping into a whole brand new, I forget how many acres this is, what is it, 120 or something? 150 acre new subdivision / section. So this isn't going to be a minor traffic adjustment. Plus, I don't know how many of you have been up there recently when both these schools are dropping off. I have some words before it, but it's not appropriate on the record. So I think this is a prime opportunity for us as a planning commission, and then further on with city staff and everybody and the town board, to make a long-term resolution. And so out of all these, just based off of engineering and associated with this, I find option 4, even though most likely going to be the most expensive, would be the best impact for traffic improvements and flow with the addition of this major property. And while also minimizing traffic going in and out of that neighborhood, which I'm sure a lot of the neighbors would appreciate, and then also minimizing the amount of four-way intersections and everything. I still have some concerns about pedestrian walkways, crosswalk safety, especially in regards to 2 schools like this, and then staging for parents. I don't know why parents get to school 20 minutes early for pickup, but they do. And so where are we going to put those vehicles, and to minimize the impact on our roadways as for those types of things. Not so much for the secondary school, there's a large drop-off loop there, but for the middle school.
Yeah, I'm not in this neighborhood, but I hear that a lot of people will park along this
Yeah, because they don't want to go in.
to wait.
They'd rather their
yeah.
kids walk out to.
And so I don't know if some of these plans we can, and again, the schools, it's really hard because they don't know what they're gonna do with this property, but it would be nice if some of these plans had a better shoulder area, and actually on-street parking and not just people taking up the roadway, because that's what I hear is happening right now. So things that we should look at.
Well, and I understand the school district's concern about what they are going to do, but there is the athletic field to the right of that building, and then also the significantly large football field that's lower below there. That if so it's not like there's a lack of property to build. It's not like it's an isolated island within a neighborhood where the footprint is the footprint. There is green space around that school. So as much as I definitely want to respect the school district, we can't plan for a plan that's not planned for, that is skeptical and unformatted and not appropriate. So, yes, when we make a plan, we want to keep the fact that there's 2 schools here. That's super important when we talk about traffic engineering. But to say that we have to worry about right-of-ways that may or may not change sometime in the next 20 years, sorry, I'm the bottom on my worry list.
How many bus routes are there? Do we know?
I wanna say there's like 7, I just pulled them up. I wanna say there's like 7 different routes.
And how many have we lost?
I don't know. And not all of them come here. A lot of them actually go down to the primary school.
Mm-hmm.
And the kids kind of move back and forth there. That's like a hub, I guess. So I don't know the specifics, but I don't know how many we used to have. Do you have any idea?
All the buses visit all the schools, so.
Because it
when
seems
you're
like they come
asking
at the intermediate
How many
school.
bus routes there are, there's 1.
Well, and I think
So,
the loss of, I think there has been a loss of routes, but that's based on losing drivers.
But that's what I'm saying, the
Yeah.
drivers, we've lost a lot of drivers. So we've lost routes, which means we have more
Parents,
hit and run, type thing.
Hit-
Kiss and run, I believe is.
the hug and go,
They call it a hug and go.
hug and go.
I hope they're not hitting and running, but
The stop, drop, and roll, yeah.
But that is a huge issue, why we have so many droppers.
Well, I mean, I think it's a lot of things. There's also
Right,
the
right.
fact that they have to be on the bus, a lot of kids, at like 6 a.m.
God, no
That's how
kidding.
long it takes.
And it's interesting too. I mean, we don't have, here's the other thing, is we don't have a safe way to get across the highway
Exactly.
right now, and unless you're way over here at our current signal. And so hopefully, this new signal and then possibly a mid-block crossing can help that. But right now, from the primary school right here, we just connected the sidewalk all the way to Orchard now. Hopefully we'll get that connection through the industrial area. Haga is putting a sidewalk along the whole north side of Bayfield Parkway, and the bike lane will stay. And that'll come up north, and then we have the crossing on this west side of the new signal with a proposed sidewalk all along that west side. And so hopefully at some point we'll have a lot more safer crossings.
That's
from
what I'm
a
saying.
highway.
We have so many bus routes that we've lost, but we still have kids that we need to
Because
get
we don't
to
have
school.
easy ways to get across the highway, or safe ways for these young kids. So maybe someday that'll change, but like Jason said, what is that, you know?
How do we plan for that if it's not
Yeah.
even ready? Yeah.
We're interfacing with two schools, so there are going to be pedestrians. And so luckily there's tons of resources out there, safe routes to schools, both federally and at the state level, numerous things. It's just, that's the one thing I don't see on here, which I don't expect to because these are proposals, but just something I would highly emphasize is that the pedestrian interface in this section of the roadway design is going to be high. And that's again why I go back to 4, because it does integrate a certain amount of pedestrian access into that, which doesn't interface with the roadway, which is,
And it's got that two-way. I didn't like that one-way.
Look,
Like, I would've
when you try to
gotten-
train traffic patterns
Yeah.
in older neighborhoods like this, it's just asking for somebody to drive the wrong way up a one-way. I'm not a fan of it if we can avoid that. So, I mean, again, it's probably the most expensive. I mean, honestly, 4 is, and I highly recognize that, but this is gonna be tapping in a roundabout. This is gonna potentially change quite a bit of traffic flow within the town as a whole, especially to that north side of the town.
Yeah.
And so I think it's an imperative that we pick a design that's not under-engineered, but honestly, planning for the growth in the next 40 to 50 years, which, if you pay attention to it, we are planning to grow quite a bit as a city, especially with the addition of this subdivision.
I agree. I think number 4 gives the most growth potential around it and the most opportunities. I think the other 3 just make a lot of weird, funky intersections around the schools and kind of bottlenecks in and out of the school. I think with number 4, what I would prefer to see is that roundabout move north and make that more of a right turn onto Oak Drive there, instead of the takeoff lane curve.
So
think from
this
the-
roundabout moving up here more?
Yeah, and I mean, even to make it like, so it's almost a right, left, or left turn 90 degrees onto Oak Drive there. I think this is just, I know what my skinny pedal does going around a curve. I think it would slow traffic down more if it was more of a right angle there. And I don't know if it'd impact any more properties doing it that way.
Well, I think the school, again, the school would like to see it more pushed up too on any of them. It's really just that, that right-of-way easement for the oil and gas, that's a hard one on that.
Where does that go moving east?
So it goes.
Does it
see,
turn
I have the
north?
bigger- Yeah, I believe it's on the north side of that road is where the main, or the larger facility, yeah, right in here. So it comes up and then just kinda curves north right there. You see that? It's the first page of your handout. You can kinda see where it's a little more open. And then there's one further to the north as well. So there's 2. Just on that new annexation that we did, there's 2 big facilities. But I believe that road mainly serves the one in the school property. Go in that direction. Yeah, so it's coming off of these roads right here, and it's coming here to serve this one. And it would be, I mean, it'd be great if they would use just the right-of-way, the roads that we put in, and get rid of any, of their own roadways, but I don't know if they like to do that. So that's something we could maybe start a conversation on if everybody wants to see. Because that takes up a lot of land, and I think the school district would be happier if they would be willing to use some of the roadways that we put in.
So what is the school district's issue with, I mean, the northern part of that property is not being used other than,
They wanted us to impact their property least amount, because they're not really sure what they want to do with that property in the future.
Yeah, it seems like it's a repeating theme because just like, the rodeo arena and Joe Stevenson Park, they didn't wanna lose that property either. And so I don't know if it's just the theme of the board or, the superintendent, but they don't wanna lose property. So I'm really not too sure, because it just seems like it seems like there would be some benefit for them to have that,
A
be able
lot.
to do bus routes and sidewalks and things like that, but I don't know, I mean, I'm not gonna guess, but that's what I'm kinda, seems like it's the theme that we're running into.
I will say, from our initial meeting with just the staff versus the meeting with the board, they've come a little ways
Yeah,
our direction. And I think because, I try and explain to them, and Katie tries to explain to them the benefits that this will be for the two schools, and understanding that it's their property, but there's a lot of benefits that it will bring to them.
and I'm wondering if they're looking at it as, property and, maybe, let's, engineer input on their end for their benefit versus us trying to tell them, because there's a couple things that I'm just curious, it doesn't make any sense to me long-term, but I'm not gonna,
I mean, the way that the secondary school is tapped into the public roadways right now is completely backwards. I mean, for just traffic engineering, exfil, infill, if, God forbid, if there was some sort of critical incident during it,
yeah. I
primary
agree.
drop off and all that stuff. It just, is an opportunity to interface with the school to engineer and correct a lot of those issues that could be relegated. I mean, I'd actually prefer to see the road wider at this point because
They need it. They need it.
Yeah.
well,
they
no,
need
it's
it.
just space. It's just space where you can have that where, parents are gonna do things against whatever instruction the school puts out and prepare it. And it's just, the
Yeah,
way it
those-
taps into that neighborhood right now is just,
Well, in the middle school football games, the parking is an amazing issue.
Do they utilize
Yeah.
this parking lot ever?
Pardon me?
Do they utilize the intermediate parking lot or no, when they have their games?
No, they use the whole road.
See, and they should be utilizing what they have.
It's too far
too.
to walk.
They would prefer to walk from.
Yeah,
well, and that's why minimizing as many left turns, that's my biggest thing as well. If we're going to try to encourage people to utilize the roundabout to get across the roadway, then we need to engineer a forced right turn at that point, because they're gonna do,
Which even for that first one, this one, let's see. That one, maybe that needs to be a forced right turn.
I would
And
recommend.
then, but you can come to the roundabout and turn back
then turn
around,
back
but
around.
otherwise, trying to make a left there, especially for drop off and
Yeah,
pickup, is
you'll
gonna be
never get out.
impossible, and then you're
No.
gonna be
Exactly.
holding everybody else up. doing
They'll be
that,
using the bus route more.
Probably.
But again, that's why I would go with 4. Like Commissioner Gadd said, it promotes the most long-term growth. Our schools are only gonna get busier, unfortunately, and more kids, which is a positive and a negative thing to have to deal with, but it seems it has the highest engineering grade. I'm adamantly against 5 because I don't support.
It doesn't do anything.
Well, no, it just having
than
having
just
to
knocking
impact
things out.
personal property. And what if we have to go to the point of eminent domain, which is just never a good place to be as the board or anything like that. So that's the only one that I'm completely against is number 5 because it impacts personal property or at least needs to do that. And then, but again, I think 4 provides a more amount of growth. It's just the pedestrian interface and then also accommodating for, and then maybe that's how we win the school board over is talking about how we can improve drop off and pick up, to minimize the residents in that area and then also make it more of a fluid situation.
Any other thoughts on these?
No, I agree with both commissioners. I like number 4 as well.
I feel like when we had this discussion initially, that was kind of all where we
We're
were
headed.
on the board
Yeah.
together in
Yeah,
19. That's kind of we were leaning towards this then.
it just makes the most sense, and I think it's the most beneficial for both. And that's just how we have to sell it to the school district. Because it does get congested up there, and it's not fun.
And I always had concern, those two houses that got split, you know, I mean, it's busy through in there.
Well, those two houses, number 5 has been talked about
Yeah.
for years, and no one was willing
No,
to
but
do it
like
because
even,
it wasn't the
like
best.
here, like on number 1.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah, having more impact of these two than what's
Mhm.
already there.
I mean, now you'll have people walking through there, but it's better than line of cars all day long.
Yeah, or having to you have to widen it for this one. And it looks pretty neck down, so I don't even know what standard this would meet, at this scale.
Well, and like you said, number 4 goes past all of the houses, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, it has the least amount of impact. Well, 2, 3, and 4 have the least amount of impacts on the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And then the most impacts on the school, so it's,
Yeah.
all right, well, thank you for that. I'll take this to the board too, and then, like I said, we'll definitely be scheduling something, I'm hoping, this year, with everybody. And hopefully the public will show up too, and, make sure everybody hears what their thoughts are as well. So we'll try and highly publicize it if we can.
Thank you, ma'am. Moving on to 2B, Dark Skies Certification Mentor Program Discussion.
Yes, so I was reached out by actually Visit Durango, who, I know Durango's in their name, but they actually get a lot of support from La Plata County. And so they look at things countywide. And they, back in, I think it's been 2 years now, the state passed a House bill encouraging towns to look at dark sky throughout Colorado. They want us to be a dark sky state ultimately. 2022, so last year. And so Visit Durango actually represented the city of Durango and applied for the mentorship last year, and they got it. So the city of Durango is going through a dark sky mentorship. And what this means is you look at lighting, you look at, our commercial lighting, our street lighting, for the most part is compliant. Some of the older stuff is not, but residential does not comply with dark sky. And so you're looking at lighting as a whole, and what can we do? What kind of policies can you put in place? It does, becoming a dark sky community is a lot of work and possibly, a lot of staff time to get to that point. But just because you want to have a dark sky certification doesn't mean you have to actually become a dark sky community. It just means you want to have those policies in place for our community. And so I just wanted to come to the Planning Commission, and I'll go to the board next week and just see what the appetite is to look into this mentorship program. Like I said, Visit Durango said they would do most of the work for us to apply for this. The information I put in your packet was from 2022, but I just found out that the 2023, because they haven't updated their website, but I just found out the 2023 applications open on October 3rd. And like I said, Visit Durango's volunteering to walk through that application process and do most of the legwork. It's a free process to have that mentorship, and then at the end, we might have a set of standards that we can adopt community-wide just to protect our dark skies. And I will say I have a fun story. The other night I was walking, my mom lives down the street, and I was walking to her house at night, and Katie lives near my mom, and all of a sudden I saw this string of lights in the sky moving, and I didn't know what the heck it was. And I was like, military? A bunch of drones. My husband, I called him, he said it was the Starlink?
Starlink.
So like
Charlie
Elon
Settle.
Musk.
Yeah, it was crazy. Like, it was like a serpent in the sky at night. And I
Yeah,
was
a lot
like,
of people
but
got
it was
some
a great
pictures of it.
night because all our streetlights were off at that time, and you could see the Milky Way. So I'm like, it's cool to have dark skies in our community, and
Some people call it Hogwarts Express.
Oh, my
So-
daughter would love that. I'm gonna tell her. That's great. Or I was thinking like what's the Polar Express too?
Uh-huh.
The North Pole. Anyways, it was neat to be able to see that. And, so I just wanted to get some feedback. And like I said, what's the appetite from the planning commission to look through at this mentor program?
So, completely separate from this, I've spent way too much time researching dark skies and its divergence from the IRC, IBC, the IPMC, and every other code and standard when it comes out to pedestrian walkway safety and lighting. The IRC, the IBC, and the IPMC all very much dictate pedestrian walkway safety, and lighting lumen requirements that contradict all of the
Dark sky.
dark skies initiatives. So my biggest concern about this for staff, and also Bayfield's movement to trying to comply more with the building codes in the IRC and the IPMC, is it would require quite a bit of ordinances and pending changes to all the standards that we just adopted, specifically with lighting and pedestrian walkway safety.
And right now, our code does talk about like commercial lighting having shut-off times. So like maybe it's midnight or whatever it is when you're not expecting a lot of people to be utilizing those facilities. And so I think there's things we could look at to try and keep the safety. And again, we don't have to be 100% certified, but we can do what would work for Bayfield. And what does that look like? I don't know yet, but, we can take some steps in that direction.
And I'm more referring to that there is quite a bit of codes and standards and building regulations associated with lighting. And I don't want the goal of just minimizing light pollution to start requiring us to amend our building code exponentially and put that onus on staff and then potentially even code enforcement and people down the line. I think that's a undue burden. And if we do move forward in this project, that we look at minimizing the code enforcement aspect of it. And of course, we can put recommendations on lighting and that they have covers and louvers that prevent upward projection of light and things like that, that's in the dark skies, but necessarily they make some recommendations to changing codes, which I feel would be a burden on staff and completely unfair, because it'd also be very difficult for builders to have to go through hundreds of pages of amended building codes to make sure that they're meeting those requirements, and then also not, the impact on homeowners and costs in case those things are overlooked. So
Yeah, and I wanted to keep it as simple as possible for people as well.
I know the dark sky lighting is quite a bit more expensive to put on a house. And then also, a lot of the times takes the electrician and stuff longer to actually put it together to get it on your house. And
Which means more money.
more money. And if we're, as Bayfield is, we're trying to move forward to make sure that we can, somewhat try to keep affordable housing here, even though housing prices are ridiculous. Dark sky lighting is definitely a step in the other direction.
I have a question, since you're out there mostly doing that, and a lot of our codes, fixtures, like plumbing fixtures and things, you can't even get the older stuff now. Everything complies with like current codes. And I'm curious if lighting will go that route, if you have any thoughts. Like you can't even go to Home Depot maybe and not even buy a dark sky fixture at some point. Do you see us go in that direction?
I do eventually, because they're just trying to change everything we do because they think what we've been doing is wrong, so why not fix it? When I don't know if that's necessarily the case. But yeah, I do see us going that way eventually. Hopefully when those kind of products are more affordable, when they can
Mass market.
build, more at a cheaper price, stuff like that. But yeah, right now, we just got done building a house out in Durango, and the homeowners wanted us to use dark sky lighting in it. It put them out of their budget by a couple $1,000s.
Wow.
And it was a large house, so there was a lot of fixtures on the outside of the house, but, it raised the price substantially.
And so if we do end up doing this, maybe there needs to be some caveats that, our concerns are cost, because we need housing, and safety of our building codes, and wanting to make sure that remains intact, and how can we work around that? I don't know the answers to that, but I'm guessing people in Colorado are, like OEdit and stuff, are figuring that out, cause they're doing it statewide, so
And I
something
mean,
to look into.
maybe some of that is having some sort of code or option to, you know, you can't just put a light at every corner of your house or something, you know, on the outside. Figure out a way that, you know, if you limit the amount of lights you can put on the outside of the house, that's just gonna make it cost less, cause we're not putting as much in. But something maybe along those lines. I don't know the answers either, but we can definitely think of something.
I mean, I think I've had people approach me and ask me about this, and I actually sent this guy your way, but, I think that is one of the big concerns about as these developments, as we grow, people are gonna say like, I've had them say it, it's just gonna be so bright, you won't be able to see the sky. That is a
It's a big concern.
legitimate concern.
Well,
Oh,
and
yeah, I
our
hear it
motto
too.
is where the stars shine.
Yeah.
I've been looking at that one, yeah.
So I think we should look into it. Like, I never want to create more work for staff. I always try to say that, but I think,
Well, they're helping with this.
yeah, that's what I like about it. So even if you get through this and I go, it's just not feasible, like maybe we can, you know, I think we already do meet somewhere in the middle on
We
this,
do.
but
And ultimately, whatever comes up still goes to the planning commission and the board to make any changes. And so it doesn't mean that they're gonna take it and it's what it's gonna be. There's a process to change codes. And you get to vet through some of the things, and maybe there's some things you like and some things you don't.
Yeah, I think as long as it's a situation where we can like, you know, find the common ground between the builder and what the town wants, so that way, you know, we're not skyrocketing prices on your electrician to come in and wire your house, but also keeping the sky a little bit darker. I mean, I think we could find it. It's just a matter of figuring out where that actually is.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think there's a big compromise between safety and dark skies too. I mean, we just finished a school in Ridgeway where they didn't want parking lights in their parking lot outside the school. And they didn't have it before.
Yeah.
Everyone was worried about what the town was gonna say when we put lights up. Put them up, they go off at 10 o'clock at night, nobody said a word about them.
yeah, they're not
But
obnoxious. They
it's-
shoot down, you know, they're.
Right, and I think commercially, I think a lot of the fixtures are going dark sky compliant right
Mhm.
now, where
Yeah.
that's all you can buy, and the codes are dictating that. So, I'm not against the dark sky, but I think there is
The
we gotta
safety
watch
piece.
how far we go with it.
Well, and with all these new subdivisions, new covenants, it can be stated in the covenants too, the lighting restrictions,
Mhm.
so.
Yeah.
Well, it basically is just kind of a mentorship to kind of give us those outlines, doesn't necessarily mean we would adopt a regulation, is that?
Correct. Yep, the
Okay.
mentorship just gives us what it would it take. They would kind of do almost an audit for us. What would it take for our code to be a dark sky code? And then we can go as far as we want with what they provide to us. But essentially, it'd be looking at our code and seeing what needs to be rewritten.
And
again, I don't know if we need to apply to be a dark sky community, but it's always nice to understand that and say, okay, what pieces can we take to make improvements
Mhm.
on our lighting code? That's free. Somebody's coming in and helping us do that versus staff doing all that research. Because lighting is complicated.
Mhm.
And so having some expertise would be beneficial as we're looking at it. And then how can we simplify that for everybody and keep it cost effective and safe, I think would be something we want to look at.
I'm not opposed to entertaining it. It's just I think people forget it. It's a kind of a sausage analogy. Everybody likes the idea, but they don't necessarily know what it takes to make the sausage. So, and spending over 40 hours professionally dealing into one of these situations, it can get real ridiculous real
Yeah.
quick. And I just don't want that for builders, the community. I mean, it's, yeah, like enforcement, staff, the whole 9 yards. I mean, the state of Sedona, Arizona has like an extra 20 pages that when they adopted dark skies that they amended their building codes, which, yeah.
Yeah, I don't want that either. But since we're on this topic too, I didn't have it in my announcements, but I did wanna let you all know that, I let the board know this recently, but the Sonoran Institute, it's a nonprofit in the state of Colorado, and they do a lot of support for communities, like with transportation projects, water projects, And they do a WaterWise workshop twice a year in the state. They've never done one down here. So I approached them and said, hey, we'd be happy to host it, as we're starting to think about water conservation, and the Board of Trustees is making that one of their top priorities for 2024, is just overall conservation efforts. How do we encourage the community to conserve our water? And so they said, well, they don't have anything on the books yet to come down here, but they do offer essentially a free mentorship kind of for 2 communities each year, to help you create policies, possibly landscape standards and different things for the community. And they told me that I should apply, so we did, and we were awarded. So we're one of the 2 communities in the state of Colorado that's going to get some free support from the group. It's a year-long process. There's going to be some public outreach, and then hopefully at the end we'll have a nice connection between future land use and water, and some good data that we can use, as well as maybe some landscape standards. We've been talking about that for a while, that we can either adopt or have some guidelines for people too, of what types of plants you should really plant in our type of environment, especially with our more drought conditions that we are seeing. So anyway, just wanted to let you all know that's pretty cool that we were offered one of those, and more to come. I'll make sure I announce when we have workshops and things like that for the public. But I'll let the board know some of the concerns on the dark sky, mainly the conflict for safety, and then also just the cost of housing and increasing that cost. And that, we're interested, but we want to make sure that it works for Bayfield, and maybe we take bits and pieces of what's available. But we'll see what they have to offer.
Thank you, ma'am. Moving on to action item 3, the agenda. Entertain a motion for approval of the August 8, 2020 minutes. 2023.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Gad,
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson,
Yes?
Commissioner Snooks,
Yes.
Commissioner Evans,
Yes.
Mayor Tarkington,
Yes.
Chair Nyberg.
Yes. Moving on to number 4, discussion and adjourn. Next Board of Trustee meetings will be September 19th, 2023. Next Planning Commission is October 10th, 2023. And I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
It's been a while since we had a show.
I know.
It's nice that when one's here.
That's exactly.
Is that the annexation?